Quickly bring in our guest perspective on this big story. Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, is joining us live. Mithali Nikore, economist, also is live with us. Kunj Shah, CMD Zodiac Energy Limited, joins us live. Abhijit Sinha, Director, Ease of Doing Business, is also with us live. Let me get you in here first, Sharad Kohli, on how much has been achieved and how much still remains for our green energy push under the NDA government.
Good evening, Uday. Good evening to NewsX viewers and good evening to my fellow panelists. Well, I personally feel, Uday, that we have achieved far more than what we should have achieved by now. And you know, the so-called developed nations, I'm afraid I always now, for the last few months, I've been adding this adjective, the so-called developed nations, because if you ask me honestly as an economist, and I think to a certain extent Mithali may or may not agree with me, I don't call them developed anymore, because when I see the state of affairs in their countries, when I see unemployment, garibi, you know, bikaris and all that, I really don't treat them as developed nations anymore. You know, we are far better. We may be having sharp contrasts within our country, but we are far you know ahead of them in many regards. So therefore, I mean, here comes the dichotomy. Whereas on one side, they keep pointing fingers to India about usage of coal and achieving this zero carbon sooner, whatever, the so-called COP26, COP27, COP28. Although I feel these conferences are I'm sorry to say that, and you'll have to pardon me for saying these conferences are useless. We have to participate in that because there is a gathering of people, environment ministers and the heads of states around the world, and you have to sit and discuss and make a commitment to the world. Well, the dichotomy is that the people who want commitment from others, this is where I went on to say so-called developed nations, they themselves are lagging behind in so many regards. I can have a whole list of things where they are lagging behind, but they want emerging economies and fast developing economies like India to come up with a firm commitment, stop using coal and come up with, they want us to achieve zero carbon yesterday, whereas they haven't reached there even today. So I think India has been galloping, coming down to India has been galloping to do that. And not because we made a commitment to COP28 or commitment to the rest of the world, I don't really care. Simply because we are conscious of the environment, and our government, our Prime Minister is very much conscious of the fact that environment is a very big danger to the world. There's no doubt about it. And his recent announcement about this Suryodaya Yojana, putting solar plants on the rooftops for more than 1 crore families, I think that speaks volumes. Production-linked incentives being given to high-tech solar panels, green credit, carbon credit, India proposing in COP28 about the carbon credit, about green credit transferability, and so on. So many things. Ethanol mixing, you spoke of ethanol mixing, and the best part of ethanol mixing is that people who use petrol, they don't even come to know that 12% of their petrol as of now is not petrol, it's ethanol. And once we reach 20%, we not just save on environment, we save on the foreign exchange costs also. So I think the Prime Minister is very much conscious when it comes to electric vehicles. You will see a revolution in electric vehicles, Uday. In the times to come, we may have achieved 6.7 million, electric vehicles. But in the next 2 to 3 years, you will see these numbers really galloping. There's going to be a multiplier effect. If you remember the smartphone era, when the smartphones came, a lot of people brushed aside, this is only for the rich. Only very few people will use it. But then there was a trigger. That trigger came and suddenly, everything else changed. A similar thing, mark my words, a similar thing is going to happen on electric vehicles, when we'll suddenly find all cities, they will be free of at least the petrol and diesel, the emissions which come out from the vehicles. At least that will be gone. Of course, the factories, the burning of other stuff, stubble burning and all that will remain. But then we are going to very soon, and I personally feel, before I hand it over to other panelists to speak, 2070 may be the target set, or which India has proposed. I personally feel, if I'm looking at the progress so far, to answer your question, Uday, very, very, in a straightforward manner, I think this is going to happen 20 years sooner. But my last remark is that we need $10 trillion to become zero carbon. Is the world cooperating with us? Are those so-called developed nations, are they going to help us? Are they going to help other emerging economies? And I think they should end lecturing to us about zero carbon. They should do something themselves and then start lecturing others, is what I have to say, Uday. Over to you.
But what all still remains to be done, Sharad Kohli? What now needs to be the priority for the years ahead as well, for the Prime Minister who will take oath after conclusion of the general elections 2024?
Well, I think to be very straight in answering your question, Uday, I think what needs to be done right now is we've seen the results, the imports from China. I will not talk of numbers. I'll talk of gigawatts. So in 2022, we were 9.8 gigawatts of import from China, which in 23 for a similar period came down to 2.3 gigawatts. So I think Atmanirbharta or self-dependence is the magic word, because I will pick up the lead from what Mitali was saying, that we are still importing a lot of equipment from solar panels, especially from China. So I think being self-dependent on imports is the first step we need to take, because everything else, Uday, is not missing. The will of the government is there, the action of the government is there, the plan of the government is there, the initiatives are there. We saw, our own road transport minister, Honorable Mr. Nitin Gadkari, has got a hydrogen car standing at his house. We don't drive hydrogen cars, but he has specially ordered a hydrogen car to try and see how it runs, how it sustains itself, where do you get the fuel, how much it runs, and so on and so forth. So the will of the government through Gati Shakti and there's so many initiatives where Prime Minister, he sleeps for only 2-3 hours a night, and he makes sure that he's working for those 21-20 hours to make sure that all the government initiatives, and I can tell you with a lot of conviction that zero carbon or green country is in the top of his list along with development, because no developing country, especially when you're developing your infrastructure, can go forward if it is causing a harm to the environment. So I think in each one of these development projects, Uday, I think green is the magic word, whether it is Bharat Mandapam, whether it is a tunnel being built, whether it is an underpass being built, whether it is a flyover being built, whether it is a highway being built. Now, I can take an example. There is a Delhi to Dehradun, expressway which is coming up, which will make you reach Dehradun in 2.5 hours. So I think in every single thing, there is a green aspect which the government is already on the job to do.
Right. Let's leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. It's time for a very short break.